The key factors to the success of being so livable is a lot of different answers to that, but one of the key factors would be that we have a focusing on that we want people to get outside. So we want people to stay outside for a long time, and having this focus on how we can get people outside, how we can organize their outdoor life, how we can plan for everyday activities and a lot of special events and a lot of different focusing on how people and what and why they want to stay outside. So we have a life strategy saying that one of the goals is that we want people to stay outside longer. So in every project that we are dealing with in the city, both the big projects, the big strategic thinking, but also the single house, the single block, the single ground floor, we have a very specific focus on how can we get people to stay longer outside. So I think this focusing on creating outdoor life is very, very important, and also in our everyday activities. So in that situation we have, for example, when we're talking about the ground floors, we talk about transparency into the buildings. We talk about making a lot of possibilities for seating. We talk about how can we get people to make food together outside, how can we get people to make sports outside, how can we get balconies where people will be outside, how can we get transparency in the building also on a longer distance. So it is not only the ground floors, but it is also transparency between the outdoor and the indoor with the building in general. And when we develop the project, we go into the dialogue with the private developers and the architects and the consultants, and we talk about how can you, as the one that is building here, help the city to get people to stay outside. And that is one of the main things that we are discussing around the project from the beginning. So in this city life strategy, we say that we want to focus on city life before designing urban space, and we want to focus on urban space before designing the buildings. So in that situation, it's a little different from how you normally plan the city, because you often start with putting buildings on a big model, and then you sometimes realize that there is an urban space between the buildings, and maybe you realize that there is an urban space and you start to plan for that, but often you do not talk about the urban life, and therefore you will often discuss it in the end instead of in the beginning. So we try to say our beginning point is the urban life. And I think that is one of the key factors that we are so focusing on it. But I also think that we have a strategy about green mobility. So during the last 50 years, actually, we have been focusing on how can we get people to walk more and how can we get people to bicycle more. And because of this focusing on the slowness of speed in the city, we also have a possibility to create eye contact between the people. And when there is some kind of eye contact, people meet and talk together, and it creates some kind of community. So I think that is also one of the key factors that we are livable. There is a lot of different methods for getting into the dialogue with the private sector. We, the last 4 or 5 years, we've been focusing on discussing how can we have an earlier dialogue with different kind of stakeholders. So talking about the private sector, we can talk about the developer and the investors. We is being more focusing on how can we go out, or two things. How can we go out, show them what the city wants before they start to design the project. So one of the things that we're doing is that we go out and make being a part of a lot of debates, making a lot of lectures, having a more public discussion about why the city wants, why we have those visions, why the politician is saying that they want a more livable city. Try to talk to them about the economic value that is with having this focus. So the one thing is that we go out giving lectures, talk with them, we invite them into the city hall, we put them together. So every 3 months we have a session in the city hall where we invite all the private sector into us. We give different kind of talk about different kind of political focus that there is present in the city at that time, and then they meet together and they can see that it is the same regulation, and that what the one is allowed to do in one place, the other one is also allowed to do, and they also realize that they have the same struggle. So therefore it is also a network between the private investors, so that they start to talk together. And then there is a lot of free time, and we ask them, what do you think, how do you think we can be better, and is there any questions? So in a way it is a possibility to create a space where we can actually have a dialogue together, and where we can try to learn and understand the differences of our different worlds. So that is one of the things. And the other thing is that we try to, when we talk, that is on a general level. And if we go into specific projects, we have been talking about and making strategies for how can we have earlier dialogues. So if we're talking to the social housing organizations, we have been focusing on that they should come to us before they normally do, and start to have the dialogue about what can this project give back to the city, and why will we put those regulations into the specific project. So in a way we are starting to develop the project more together than we did before. And by having this focusing on doing the project together, we do not waste each other's time as well. So we know we are very precise about then what do the city want, and the private investor will be very precise on what do I want and why do I want that. This is because that is important, and we as the city administration can go and say, yeah, but this is important for the cities. So in that way we use this early dialogue as a method of creating a better project from the beginning. This focusing on economy, I think we are being aware of today that cities need a good economy, because that gives us the possibility to invest in new infrastructure and invest in new kindergartens, and to make those investments we also have to focusing on the economy as a driver in developing the cities. So I think what we have been doing the last couple of years is that we have been focusing on what the value is of livability, and we have been focusing on what is the value of having a good brand, what is the value of having a good image, what is the value of having a big network, and try to put money on this kind of qualities. So we made a research program saying how can we put money into livability, and one of the research told us that we could see that when we collect the data about the economy in the real estate, we could see that the value of a building would raise if there was a diversity at ground floor. So therefore we could, in that research program, we could try to connect the economy value and the value of the estate together with the focus that we are having on livability. And this is a very interesting tool when we go into the dialogue with the private investors, because now we can go into the language that they are having, and we can talk about economy, and we can talk about if they say, it's too expensive to have shops at ground floors, and it's too expensive to have small shops with a lot of entrances because it's difficult to rent out, or there could be a lot of discussion about that, or they would use it for something that is giving them more money. Then we can start to talk about, yeah, but on a long term, your value of your estate will actually raise because you will put the investment in that in the beginning. So therefore we now start to talk about how we can make diversity also in the contracts for the owner of the estate. So if they put a temporary contract saying that for the first 5 years it's very cheap to rent the shops at the ground floors, then it will start a livability, and it will start that the upcoming artist or the small shops or whatever will have the possibility to pay for the rent at the ground floors, and then on a longer term the owner now knows that it will pay back on a long term because the value would raise in the end. So a long reflection on that economy and the quality of the city is going hand in hand, and what we have to be better at is to find a language where we can talk about it. And I think that is also about how we actually understand our different practice and the different methods and the different goals compared to what kind of role you are having in the development of the city. So I think a lot of it will be about combining different way of thinking and try to put language on that that we can understand, all of us. But it is also about an openness, that it's a way of saying that of course the private investors have an interest in earning money, and of course the city has an interest in how can we create a good community in the city. And by acknowledge that and say this is of course the different goals that we are having, then we can actually start to talk about how can we do that together and how can every goal actually get into reality.